So we're going to start looking at writing object-oriented code by looking at non-object-oriented code, or the procedural code that we've been working on. So if you look at DICE example 1, you'll see that code we've been using for a week or so now. We're importing random integer. We're setting a variable die1 equal to a random integer between 1 and 6, and then we're printing the result, which looks suspiciously like a six-sided die, does it not? We have 2, 1, 5, 6. So we have code that works just like looking at a six-sided die. If we look at example 2, you can see that I now put it in a for loop, and I run that piece of code at line 5, where die1 is equal to random integer 1, 6 10 times, and sure enough, I get 10 different numbers. Well, 10 random numbers, which look like I'm rolling a dice, which I'm not very lucky. I got a whole lot of ones. If you're playing Risk, ones are not good. If we look at die example 3, I now make a function. And you can see the function right here. And I'm calling the function from inside the for loop. So I now have a for loop, and inside the for loop, instead of having the random number code, I call the function, and it returns the random number, and then I print it. So it looks sort of like a dice now. I roll 10 times, die1 changes to roll. So I can roll a number and it gets a value between 1 and 6. So it's starting to look a lot like a dice, at least to me. If we look at dice example 3a, I want to talk about scope here. So I have a variable that I set to 0 here. And I print that variable. The code looks exactly the same. I call roll. The problem, and it sets the value to it right here. The problem is this die1 is not the same as this die1. This is a local variable that only works within this function, and this is a global variable that works throughout all the code. So if I run this, you can see I get all zeros because it stays 0. If I change that to a 5, you can see when I run it, all I get is 5s. This is not this die1 is not the same as that die1. Even though it looks like it's all the same, it's not, because it's inside a function. If you declare a variable inside a function, its only use is inside that function. So you have to be wary of your scope of the variables that you're using. In functions, you want to pass the values to the function and return the values from the function. And that'll start getting us used to similar to things that we'll have to deal with functions, which we'll get to next.